Hello and welcome. In this session, we are going to take a Microsoft Exchange server with its mailboxes. We're going to migrate them directly into the M365 tenant. We don't have any linkages there with Azure AD or Hybrid. We're just going to take the mailboxes and transition them from the on-prem server directly into M365. Now, this is a great way if you've got a company that has a completely standalone Exchange environment and we want to move them to M365 with no things left behind, no hybrid links or anything to be aware of, and we can obviously decommission the Exchange server immediately afterwards. So let's go ahead and see how we might do that with the MigrationWiz console. Now in the console, we would normally just go and hit Create Project, and we'd start a Mailbox project. But before I do that, there are some prereqs that you need to do on both the Microsoft Exchange server and also on the M365 tenant. So let's go ahead and do the Exchange server and the requirements there first. And we'll do the M365 one second. And what we need is a MigrationWiz service account. So you can see I've made one here. Now this is just a normal generic account, and just give it an address, and obviously it can log in with its password. Now what we do need to do here is we need to give this mailbox rights to be able to pick up the information out of all the mailboxes. Now I'm going to refer to the Help Center in the BitTitan site and just show you a couple of things about that. Now this is the migration guide for an Exchange on-prem to M365, and you can see you can find that under the Exchange Migrations, Mailbox, Migration Guides. It goes straight into the 2007 plus onwards there. Now what I want to show you is just a little bit down on the documentation, just where it's talking about the configuring permissions. You can see that there is another way you can do it with 2007 plus. You need to go into each mailbox, obviously with the PowerShell here, and grant the access rights to the MigrationWiz service account. Now, I would suggest that we use this one here, the 2010 plus, which is the impersonation. And that's a single command which we're going to run. We just add a new management role assignment, enabling the application impersonation for that account. And that will allow the service account to then get at all the data to obviously drag it out so we can perform this migration task. So in the Exchange server here, you can see I've just cut and pasted that command out, and I then replaced the MigrationWiz there with the actual service account we're using. So we'll then take that command. And I'm going to put that into the Exchange PowerShell, and on that, you see very quickly it does actually apply those rights. So that is all we're going to need to do on the Exchange server for those rights. And there is a nice way to test if that has worked correctly. What you can do is you can use this tool from Microsoft, the testconnectivity.microsoft.com. Go to the Exchange server options, and you've got this service account access here. Now, when you're in there, you can see I've already partially filled this out. But what it's doing is saying, okay, we can give it the target email address, which is one of our test users here. We're going to give it the service account, which is the MigrationWiz account, obviously with the password. I'm going to specify the web services. Now, it does require the exchange.asmx, but you can just put in mail. In this case, migrationfrog.com. It will find its way to your server in the correct place there. And we're going to say test with a predefined folder, which will be the inbox. We're going to use Exchange impersonation, and we want it to impersonate that user. So we'll do that and perform that test. As long as that comes back as being correct, then we are good to go from that side. Okay, looks like that's done very quickly. Now we have got a warning, but that'll be an SSL warning, which there. But you can see what it's done. It's saying, can it create a new mail in the mailbox, and then can it go back and delete it? So really, with this test in place, it means that the impersonation you put for that MigrationWiz service account is in fact working correctly, which is good. So moving on back through that help desk article, you can see that if I just scroll down here, it talks about verifying that access and the like. So that's what we've just done with that test connectivity. So we can now go ahead and prepare the destination. Now this comes down to the modern auth requirements that it needs. Inside the MigrationWiz tenant, obviously basic auth is now deprecated, so we need to use the modern auth. Now this is obviously the guide to go ahead and do that, but I'm going to show you that we will make reference to this item just here. So how we go ahead and do that is to jump into the Office 365 tenant. As you can see, obviously in the Azure Active Directory, you're going to get this come up. In this view, you can see down here, you've got applications, and we go to app registrations. And then we just hit new registration here. And I'm going to give this one a name. I'm just going to call it MigrationWiz. Actually, we'll call it MigrationWiz. And the options here, we need to just say organization only for that tenant. We do need to select the public client native. Now, this is the field that we need copied from the documentation. So let me just grab that. That's from here. We'll copy this and drop that into that window there. And we will just go ahead and register that. Now, the other two things you need to do is you need to go to the authentication tab, and down the bottom here, we need to put yes on there. Save on that one, and then jump into the API permissions. Now, this is quite important we get this right. So we go through here and add a permission, and we want to look at APIs my organization uses, and we just do a quick search. We're looking for Office 365 Exchange Online, this one here, and that will be delegated permissions. Now down here, we will go to EWS and tick that box on, add the permissions in. Now we will just go and grant admin consent, so, and that will give that, and really that is everything successful. I'm going to jump back to the overview because we need to copy out these items. So I'm going to grab the client ID as a whole thing here. Do that. Paste that into Notepad, and I'm going to grab the directory ID as well. Grab that too. We'll keep that for a little later on. We'll need that in the advanced options in the MigrationWiz project setup. Now we do need to add the application impersonation rights on the M365 side as well. So in a very similar way to what we did with the Exchange server on-prem, we're going to grab a PowerShell window here, and we're going to connect into M365 with our normal admin account, and we're going to grant the service account access to do the application impersonation. So the first thing we want to do there is obviously create the service account inside M365. And you can see from here, I do have one. I've just called it migwiz@planium.com. That's the target account. And it does have a mailbox. It's not absolutely necessary. I find that if I'm using this for different things like Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive, there are different requirements on whether it needs a mailbox or not. If we're doing a full suite, then we would obviously give it that license to have the mailbox. If you're doing a Teams migration at all, it's going to need a Teams license as well. So generally, if I've got them spare, I will just add them in here. But you can see that is the service account set up. Now to connect into M365, we do need to install the Exchange Online Management commandlet base. If you haven't done that already, then you can do so with typing in this command, which is this one here. That will go ahead and install the Exchange Online Management for you. The allow club reinforce means if it does have an older version, it will actually go through and do the update for you. And you can see there. Obviously, in this example, I use that a lot. So it's obviously giving me this error here. That's totally fine to carry on with. If you haven't had it installed, it will install it fine for you. But now what I'm looking to do here is to connect Exchange Online, which will then ask us to log in. We'll go ahead and put the username there and hit next. So we'll use our password, hit sign in. It's going to give me an MFA prompt. I'll just prove that, and that will let us into that commandlet. There we go. Now the command we're going to run here is virtually identical to the on-prem one. Is this one here. So a new management role assignment, give it the role and give it the user. Now if we're looking to where that comes from, if I jump back into that help desk article, which is here, you can see there is the command which we are wanting to run. Back to the PowerShell. That, and you can see obviously very quickly it comes back, and we are good to go. Now remembering as well that these service accounts that you have, the MigrationWiz at planium.com, cannot have MFA turned on. It will not work with MFA. So you need to, if you've got a conditional access policy, you're going to need to exclude it. If you've got the security defaults turned on the tenant, I'd recommend you turn those off and do it through conditional access and other policies anyway, but you can't have MFA enforced on that account. That is a definite, it will not work if you have that, basically. So let's go ahead now and talk about the setting up the Mailbox project and get this one started. So we go to the Mailbox project and we will give it a project name. And I'm just going to do the same customer we had, the Zoetrope, the one we've been using previously. So we'll just carry on with that to our next step. So we're going to set up source and destination endpoints. Now, obviously, the source is going to be your on-prem Exchange server. So we hit New here, and we'll name the endpoint like so. And the endpoint type is going to be Exchange Server 2003 Plus. Now, it wants to know the Outlook web access. Now, this is the connection externally that the MigrationWiz console will use to extract all the data. Now, that will actually be your OA address that the service account is going to use with those impersonation rights to get in and get that data out. So in this case, we'll type in that address like so, and we will provide the credentials, which will be the admin username. As you can see, I just put in like that and add. Now that corresponds to the same settings that we had when we were doing the EWS check with that Microsoft test site. So we know that's going to work. So that's good. We'll carry on and go to the next step, which is setting up the destination. So here we'll do a new one as well, and we'll call that I've called it that. You might wonder why I've put this in here, but obviously we're using the same company name and the same set of credentials which we've had previously for this Zoetrope and Planium migration. So there is already an endpoint for M365 in this customer setup in the MigrationWiz console. I want to create a nice new one just to show you this coming in from scratch if you've not looked at the other sessions. But I mean, we could obviously just pick up the other endpoint. If you're doing a migration and you've got multiple things coming into the same endpoint, just go and select the endpoint. Just go and grab it, and you can reuse endpoints that way. But in this case, we'll use a new one, and we'll give it a username, which, as you can see here, and we hit add, and that is ready to go to our summary page. Now, we can save the project and we can get into it, but I do want to show you these advanced options that we need to set up for this type of migration. I spoke before about the modern auth, what we need for the M365, and also that account impersonation too. So we need to make sure that those are correctly configured. So how we do that is we go into the advanced options here, and we're going to add some extra things into this. Now I'm going to refer back to that Help Center article because it's got some context here we need. So when we're doing the modern auth for the M365, we need to put these items in. Now remember, I saved those in the notepad, the application ID and the tenant ID in there for later on. Now these are what we're going to be using. So if we're enabling modern auth on the source, we use these two for the export and the import if we're using modern auth on the destination. So this is the one we want. I'm going to grab this one and put that into notepad and as well and just build those out. So I'll just do that quickly. So you can see just by taking those, cut and pasting them over the top, I've now got the client ID and the tenant ID that we need. So what I then do is I'll grab that whole line and copy that into these areas here. So we need one in here. Let's jump back into the notepad and grab that one as well. That in there. And that is all good. Now I will just show you one other thing you need. When you go to the source and destination, you need to make sure you tick this on. Now this is saying we are using impersonation to authenticate on the Exchange server. That's obviously what we've been doing this whole time. But that will come on there. And when you go back to the support, you'll find that after you've saved it, and if you were to go back in to advanced options, you will notice there's an additional one here, which are these two, which is showing that it is turned on. So this is obviously important that we need to have that done correctly. But once we save that, and then save the project, and we come back to our screen where we'd normally add items into the project. So with that, really the setup is completed. We're now ready to add our users in and start testing our migration. So obviously a number of ways that we can bring things in. We can do a quick add and type names in. We can do a bulk add from a spreadsheet. That's something I showed you in other videos how to do that. It's really just two columns of the source and destination. But one of the nice things we can do on this type of project is an auto discover. I just want to show you on here, this is coming back to that Exchange server. And I've got this here to show what mailboxes we have. Not very many, it's quite a small site, but these are the users that we're going to be migrating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the auto discover, and if I hit start here, it will go and look at those mailboxes that it can find with those credentials that we've given it. This is obviously a good test as well, that things are working well with your permissions, because it will go ahead and discover them and allow us to bring them in. Let me just wait for that to do it and come back in a second. So that's completed and it's found 13 items. I'm going to say import items there. We'll see those mailboxes turn up so that you can see that list matches what's on the Exchange server. So this obviously is, when you look at the destination, you'll notice it's got the same UPN there. The discovery doesn't know what the target domain is going to be, so we're going to have to tell it. So I'm just going to say change domains and key in what the destination address is, which you can see is the planium.com. And if I hit save and close, you'll see that now all of these will be good. So that's good if your migration is doing a like for like on the UPN prefix. That's all good. So auto discovery is very good for that. If you've got a more complex migration where you've got people that are changing names with different HR policies, that means Bob can't be Bob anymore, he has to be Robert. You're obviously going to have a matching process there, which is why you'd have a spreadsheet and a CSV file, obviously depending on the size and what you're doing. But in this particular example, we're doing like for like on these. And obviously these mailboxes need to be live inside the M365 tenant as well. So they need to be created as users, and they need to have a license attached and a mailbox which is live. So for this example, I've taken one of these users and provisioned the mailbox for them. So let me just show you that. So here's the test case user that I want to talk about here. And if we log on as them inside the source environment and the destination environment, I just want to show you what it currently looks like. So this is looking at a workstation with her account set up there. You can see that's the inbox, so you can see that she does have mail and other things going on. So this is all good to look at as a source. And if I just drag up here, you'll see this is logged on as the Microsoft 365. This is her new account, as you can see, and it is set up with nothing in it currently. It's a blank mailbox ready to go for this migration. So I wanted to show you this because as we go through the steps, we should see mail appear in here as we do this migration in a live fashion. So you'd probably be doing this for a test user, and this is our test user in this example. But a test user is good. You can see the flows and make sure that everything is being migrated correctly and that you're happy with what's coming over. So what we'll do, the first thing is we need to tick that one there, and we'll do a start, and we're going to do verify credentials. Now what this will do is it will go ahead and connect to the source and make sure it can read everything and everything's good on that side. And then it connects to the destination and also makes sure that the credentials are good and it has the ability to write into those mailboxes and everything looks good for the migration. It's a good final test before we start to kick off the actual move of data. So we'll do that, let that actually submit. Got to go into the backend queue for MigrationWiz, and we'll refresh that and see what it looks like shortly. Just while we're waiting for that to go through, I do want to talk about something else when it comes to the performance of the on-prem Exchange server you have and the throttling requirements that you may need to put in, because there are throttling. Obviously, when it's doing the data, it's using that single OA connection as itself and grabbing data. So if we go back to the Help Center article and look at this policy that we can set up here for the throttling, you'll see we can disable throttling parameters completely. And that's where we create the new throttling policy and we basically take them out. We set them as null. And then we can apply that to this here. Now this says MigrationWiz. This is going to be your MigrationWiz service account that you obviously need to replace and do that. So it really does depend on the performance you've got of your Exchange server. You might have a bank of them. You could have everything done correctly in terms of getting that data out. But sometimes throttling can be an issue. So remembering that you can do this, I would suggest that you just keep an eye on it, look at the server resources and make sure you're not maxing it out as you're dragging the data from it. But importantly, migration performance is often linked to this type of thing. So if you need to do it and take off that throttling policy, it's in the help desk article. We just use these on PowerShell inside the Exchange Management shell and go ahead with that. We just refresh that and you can see it has completed verification. So it looks like we're good on both sides. So now we're ready to start moving some data across. Now I want to talk briefly about the concept of pre-stage and full migration. If we were to take this account and we hit start, you can see you've got a pre-stage. Now what pre-stage does is, in a migration scenario, you might have a lot of data, so we don't want to say kick off a migration on a Friday night and have all of the data being copied at that point. What we want to do is we want to pre-stage all of the data, and if you've got lots of mailboxes, lots of accounts, we'd do it and say we're going to pre-stage. You can see one of the default things here is from 30 days ago. Now what that'll do is it'll pre-stage just the mail and everything from 30 days backwards, so that doesn't affect the mailboxes at all, doesn't delete anything or anything, which is good. And it will enable us to have everything pre-staged so that when we do the cutover on, say, a Friday night, we will just be copying the last 30 days of mail and all the other items in the mailbox. So the mailbox migration itself should run relatively quickly, because our huge mailboxes that we've been having in the background have spent however long time you've done, maybe a couple of weeks, to get the migration up to that point, knowing then that your cutover is going to be nice and clean and tidy. So here you can see it's talking about license types. Now we haven't covered licenses yet, so this is a good opportunity to do this. You can see that it's saying that we don't have a license available to migrate Madeline's email. And I know for a fact that I have licenses in there, so really what is happening? What is going on here? But let me just jump back into the licensing structure and show you. Now if I go into here and licenses, it'll drop me into the MSP complete. And you'll see that I do in fact have these user migration bundles which were purchased to enable us to do mailbox migrations. Now the mailbox license itself, the core one, which just does mailboxes, we haven't purchased. We've done the UMB license instead. So what we need to do is we need to tell the system that we want to use a UMB license. That then makes a tag on that user. We can then use it for things like the deployment pro, the documents, and the other things that the user migration bundle can do, not just the mailbox. Now how we go ahead and do that is go back to our console. With this one tagged, we will say apply licenses, and we'll apply that user migration bundle license to Madeline's account. You can see we have 15 of them. It'll go down to 14. We'll hit apply, and it'll take a few minutes, but it will show up in here as being a yes. So that really is our tag to say we want to use the UMB bundle on this account. Now when that shows up for that customer in the back end, which is why we have the customer settings, what it will do is then allow us to use things like deployment pro and what have you from this UPN, because it ties that license in accordingly. You can see after a refresh, we've got a yes there. So now if I go and hit the pre-stage, that error will be gone, and it will tell us that it will be consuming one of the UMB licenses. You can see here the pre-stage, this is all good. We have our 30 days. We can schedule it to start at a particular time if we want to, but I'm just going to kick this one off now and say go ahead and pre-stage this mailbox with everything 30 days and older for mail. So I'm just going to start and let that one go through. And when we drop back in here, you can see that the pre-stage is now completed. So we are ready for whenever we need to perform the full migration and cut her over completely. I will just bring up the mailboxes though, so you can have a look at this. This is the target mailbox on the 365 side, and you can see that it's got email data there going back to the 19th of January, which is basically 30 days ago from now, so that the pre-stage has done that effect. There aren't any items in there in terms of the calendar. So calendar here, you can see there's nothing there, and also no contacts, because obviously the pre-stage isn't doing that. We're going to come back when we finish the migration and just show those that they have dropped in there successfully. So now what I'm going to do is just tag this one again and hit the full migration. And you can see now we've got more items opening up. So it will do all of these tasks, and it will ask us if we want to automatically schedule the migration at a particular time. We can if we want to. In this case, I'm not. I'll get it to run straight away, but we will start that now, get that in the queue, and come back once that has completed. Do another refresh here. We can see the full migration has now completed. Let's take a quick look at her mailbox on the targets. And we can see, yes, indeed, we have mail from very recently, going back to that 30 days, which it needed to catch up on. Also, let's have a look at the calendar. And yes, we have a couple of items come over there, and we should have something in the contacts. Yes, we have a contact in there as well, which is good. So really it means that her mailbox is now done. Now, if it were to happen that we needed to not cut her over at that time, and it ends up where we're going to be pausing that one, you can run another full migration, and that would then catch up anything from that point in time across onto the target mailbox. It's not going to do any duplicates. It will just copy over what is different between the two, and you are basically good to do as many of the full migrations, up to I think 10 full migrations with a standard license. So there's things to be aware of there if you're doing those. So that'll conclude this session of the Exchange server into Microsoft 365. We thank you for watching, and we will talk to you again soon.